And with Tzedakah, when I remember the Tzedakah thing, I will address it. I think we're recording, yeah. Okay, so the Egyptians. So this is the famous Rambam. The question asks the question: why are the Egyptians punished? HaKadosh Baruch Hu decreed that Am Yisrael is going to go down to Egypt and is going to suffer in Egypt, and therefore the Egyptians had no choice, which brings up the larger question of God's foreknowledge and free will. The Rambam says elsewhere that God's foreknowledge does not contradict free will, and he says, but it's too complicated for me to explain. And the Ravid says, if you're not going to explain it, why bring up the question in the first place? And so he's just going to leave people dangling. So obviously it's a very profound question, and we'll come back to it in a couple of minutes. But in terms of the Egyptians, so the Rambam's answer is that the Am Yisrael have to suffer, but who imposed the suffering on them didn't have to be the Egyptians. Or, if it had to be the Egyptians, it didn't have to be any specific individual Egyptian. So the suffering would happen, but the suffering didn't have to happen through them. It's kind of like we have principle Megablin Schusay de Zakai, Bechira Vadechai. We bring about good things to good people and bad things by bad people. So they decided to be bad, and that's how it came about. So it's still difficult, because obviously somebody had to do it. So it diminishes the free will. Now, the truth is that that's not a question, because we always think of free will as being 50-50. In other words, 50% this way, 50% that way, right? It's not that way. You can have the Adam Rishon was framed by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Adam was put in a situation where it was almost impossible for him not to sin. He had free will, but 90-10 or 95-5. Most of the overwhelming odds were that he was going to sin. Yes?
I think Ramchal says the opposite. He says that the world in Gan Eden was completely balanced between evil and good.
No.
So you have to free.
No. The Ramchal indicates that he was framed as well. Because Ramchal holds that history had to happen. If history had to happen, so then it wasn't a 50-50 thing.
Might be misremembering.
Yeah. But look, bear in mind, the Chazal say the world's created gracious, b'shvil Yisrael shenikru gracious. For if you need a Yisrael, then you need to have a Chet in Gan Eden. Right?
Right.
So therefore, it was embedded in creation that this is going to happen. Now, there's a remote chance it won't happen. But it's very, very remote and infinitesimal in odds. And there's a fundamental principle that HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't necessarily give you a choice where it's 50% yes, 50% no. It could be the odds are stacked against you. Could be very often the odds are stacked in your favor, but the odds can be stacked against you as well. So any particular Egyptian or the Egyptian nation could be their odds stacked against them. It was pretty definite, let's say, that it was going to be the Egyptians who were going to do the cause of suffering. But nevertheless, there was some element of free will. That's interesting, because I'll explain. Don't make faces. I'll explain. Or you can make faces, and I'll explain. There's an interesting tradition in the name of the Alta from Slobodka. He said about Parshas by Parshas Vayishlach. Parshas Vayishlach, it says that when Yaakov came, it's actually Medrash, when Yaakov came back from and he met Esav, so he put Dinah in a box and closed up the box. And later on, Esav, of course, didn't see Dinah, and the reason why he didn't want to see Dinah is because he didn't want Esav to take her for a wife, and Chazal say he was punished for this. He was punished by having his daughter taken and molested at Shechem. So the Alter Slobodka asked the question, he says, what was he supposed to do? He was supposed to let Esav marry his daughter? That doesn't make any sense, right? You're supposed to take her son-in-law who's a Russia? So he says, a very, very profound Musar idea. He says, yes, Al Pi Din, Yaakov did the right thing, and he should have done what he did. But when he knocked the nails into the box to close her off from Esav, what went through his mind was not, it's too bad I can't give her to Esav as a wife. What went through his mind was, I'm saving her from Esav. And so the free will in this case was extremely limited, right? There was no bandwidth of free will because he actually was supposed to put her in a box. But the question is, what attitude do you take when putting her in the box? Okay, what's bothering you now?
You said there was no bandwidth of free will.
What?
What do you mean there was no bandwidth of free will? Either there is free will or there's not free will.
Why? That's not true. We talked about this last week. Do you have free will to become a basketball player? A pole vaulter?
There are limitations on the free will. That's what I was looking for last week when we spoke. There's such a thing as your current limitations in life, but that doesn't necessarily affect your will to choose.
What do you mean? There's many things you cannot choose. You cannot choose. You cannot choose to have blonde hair. You can choose to dye your hair, but you can't choose to have blonde hair.
CRISPR method.
What? Whatever you say. You don't get my point, right? Take a different example if you want. Okay. The point is that, of course, free will is limited. Everybody's free will is severely limited by circumstance, right? But the point within that narrow bandwidth, you do have free will. But what you're going to do is basically, to a large extent, predetermined by by who you are, where you are, the circumstances, and so on and so forth. So by the Mitzrayim also, to a large extent was predetermined. What they're punished on is the extent of their free will. Now it's important. That's one answer. Okay, again, even though it was decreed, they had to do it. Nevertheless, the fact that it was decreed doesn't mean there isn't any iota of free will. And if nothing else, suppose the Egyptian had to hit the Jew. But like Yaakov Avinu, he could have had in mind, I have to hit the Jew. Because of whatever responsibility I have. But what he actually had in mind was, gewaldig, I get to hit the Jew. Yeah.
So this is the opposite of Desmond's point from last week.
How so?
As he said, free will is only in the parts where it's the trenches or the front line.
Yeah.
So this is even in the clear territory.
But you're assuming that if the German army is facing the French army in World War I, that they're an equal power. The French, at certain points of war, the German army was much stronger. Other points of war, the French army was much stronger. So let's.
No, but I feel like the way I understood it was the cases where he said that it's clearly in one territory or the other. Are these cases where it's like
No. Because again, anything is situational. And if you're met with an overwhelming nisayon, then, Chazal uses the Lashon, Mayasa ben shlo yechta. What is the kid going to do that he's not going to sin? So there are, even at the front line, there are possibilities of coming across the enemy's artillery, which is going to have a tremendously devastating impact upon you. Conversely, you can use perhaps deploy your artillery and have a devastating impact on the enemy. It's not necessarily 50-50. Okay. So
I'm not really understanding the logic of that.
It means
one
that
side is under what I understand is you have a line. Anything above that line is anything that you're doing properly. If anything under it is anything that's ara is surely you're surely acting in accordance with it. And then that thin narrow line is what you're battling over, right? But over here we had with the Egyptians, their persecution of the Jews was something that was clearly in their Yetzer Hara's territory, but they still could have had the free will not to do that.
So that we're saying, listen, so I was saying that, it's good, valid point. We're saying that's something you bring down the altar from Slabodka. In other words, to say that there is a point of Bechira, I guess I'm going to concede the premise of your question, which is there must be some point in the abstract at which the potential for sin or not sin is 50-50. But it might only be in the attitude, not in the action. Okay? In other words, the action might be predetermined, but the attitude is not. Okay, that's one possibility. But of course, if you're a chassid, or even a Kabbalist, you have a much easier possibility, which is, what do you think?
destiny?
Goyim have no free will. Right? They don't have, it's a matter, the Tzaddik quotes a Chazal which says that something to the effect that all the Roman legions were like packs of ants. And that means just like an ant has no free will, it just goes by instinct. So too the Egyptians had no free will. Now it's a very difficult thing to sustain. I'm telling you. But Hasidim, if you look in last week's Ishbitzer, you will see that Hasidic approach is that Goyim do not have free will.
Even on the Shabbat
It could be on the Shem mitzvahs they do,
I heard that,
but not on anything else. Right. So I find this very difficult to accept because
No.
Goyim seem to have free will, right?
Yeah, one, Adam Arishan was not Jewish.
Well, it would have changed by Matan Torah. That's what they hold.
Well, okay,
That's what the Ishbitzer says.
okay, then explain Gerim after Matan Torah.
Oh, come on. That's a soft. Lob me a harder picture than that one. Come on. What they'll say is the Gerim were really Jewish neshamos, which came from, which are embedded in non-Jews in order to give them the Gerus process.
Give me tangible evidence.
What?
Give me tangible
I can't. So that's what they'll say to you, right? I can't give you evidence for that, but that's what they'll say. That's what they do say. So it's very hard to sustain that point. But if you look at the Ishbitzer and last Ishbitzer and Chayisora, that's basically what he says, that the Goyim don't have free will. They lost it by Matan Torah, and that's why Gemara Baba Kama goes so far as to say that they don't even get schar on. There's an opinion they don't even get schar in Sheva Mitzvahs anymore.
What?
Yeah,
Who says this?
the Gemara Baba Kama.
Ah.
Daf Lamed Ches. You can check it out.
Anymore
After Matan Torah, right? Because they lost that capacity. So if you go with that, then you really don't have a problem with dealing with the Egyptians because the Egyptians don't count. They don't have free will anyway.
But that was before Matan.
What?
The Egyptian stuff was before Matan.
You're right. Evidently, it started before. In other words, they lost the free will altogether because they lost it as a result of the wickedness. So evidently, the wickedness started earlier. It's a good point what you're making.
So you're saying like Egypt was uniquely wicked, so they lost it before everyone else.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I don't like that answer, but it is an answer which is given. Okay. So this idea of the Egyptians being the punished is again based on the assumption that they had some free will, even though it was a minimal amount of perhaps a minimal amount of free will, but there was some free will involved. They did not have to do what they were doing, or they did not have to do what they were doing with the relish with which they did it. Okay, so so this gets back, as I said before, this gets back to the idea of Yediah and Bechira, God's foreknowledge versus our free will. So I think I might have mentioned last week the Ralbag. I mentioned Ralbag last week, right, which has this heretical perspective, so to speak, that God doesn't know the future. But the Rambam again never gives an answer. But the answer which is associated with the Rambam is the answer which is given by some other more obscure Rishon, the Ram Al-Mosino, who says that since God transcends time, he doesn't know the future. The future takes place immediately, as does the past and the present as well. And the mashal I like giving to it for this, even though it's not a perfect mashal, is that if you have a split-screen TV, then you see things happening in different places at the same time, even if it's live TV. Well, God's split screen doesn't just bring spaces together, which are and allows you to see two spaces at the same time, but allows everything which happened or will happen to be seen at the same time on his unique 4D screen.
Like the Oracle in the Matrix.
The Oracle in the Matrix is able to see. Yeah. Okay.
Is there a nafkamina for humans that Hashem could see the future and the past at the same time, the future, present?
Yes. So Reb Tzadok, Reb Dessler says that there is an nafkamina, which is that the way he explains chus avos, the merit of the forefathers. He said, we say in Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, we say in Rosh Hashanah that the Akedah of Yitzchak Avinu today you should remember for his descendants. And Reb Dessler says, well, actually, I should say there's a Chazal which says that, Schus Avos is no longer exists. We don't have the Merit of Avos, the Bris Avos we have. But in any event, it does seem like far-fetched that we do have, for so much time, merit still from the forefathers. So the way Reb Dessler explained is that there's a medrash that says, I believe Rashi brought it down 2 weeks ago, a faro shel Yitzchak tzavru munach al gabei mizbech. The ashes of Yitzchak are, in present tense, sitting on the Mizbeach. Now, of course, Yitzchak wasn't actually burned. But since Avraham Avinu had the complete intent of doing so, and his hand was only stayed at the last moment, therefore it was as if they're ashes, and they're symbolic ashes of Yitzchak. And Hashem sees them constantly. And that's on one side of the screen. And you're on the other side of the screen. Thousands of years later. So Hashem see if there's Schus Avos is a death, it's because there's a connection between the screens. There's an interaction. Let's talk about that. If there's no interconnection between the screens, in other words, your behavior is so out of sync with Avraham Avinu, Yitzchak Avinu's behavior, so then there's no Schus Avos.
So is this could you expand this concept into maybe validating the idea of multiple realities coexisting simultaneously?
No. 1 second.
Why?
If
Hashem
is in
first.
past, present, and future, like at the same time, why do we never see the past
Even
change?
At least God can see.
Hashem doesn't change it. Hashem sees it. Hashem is out,
He has control over it.
but he doesn't change it.
It only changes.
It couldn't work with us. It would wreak havoc with us if things were linear. Since everything else exists, anything
How do we
besides.
know what would wreak havoc for us? That's what I'm trying to say. We don't know that.
It's not like each of
Maybe
those
it'll be
is
good. Maybe
going off.
If
who's to say it'll be bad?
If the past changed, I have to tell
That's
you.
just how we'll live. Like it'll just be the new norm.
I have to tell you, I once had this theory that happens, and the reason I had this theory is there's a Gemara in Gittin, which says that it talks about Pilegesh Begiva, the episode where the Levi kicked his wife out and to the masses, and they raped and killed her. Anyway, so it says that he got angry. So the question is, what he got angry about? So one says that because he found she hadn't properly shaved, and the other said because he found something in his soup. Then later on, whoever was remember the Machlokas went and met Eliyahu Navi, and what did Eliyahu Navi say? Elu be'elu divrei Elokim chaim. They're both true. He found a hair in his soup, and he found she wasn't shaved. He wasn't upset about hair in soup, but he was upset that she hadn't shaved. Shaved. That was the minute back then. So shave their private areas. So I was thinking when I went to Gemara many years ago that if you want to be radical about it, you can say that how do they know? What is this? How do they know thousands of years later? And if they knew, why are there such divergent traditions? So what you could say, if you want to be really radical, is that no, the history was determined by Rav Yosef, I think it's Rav Yosef and Rav Tzadok, by their machlokas later on. In other words, what happened historically was actually determined retrospectively by their machlokas many years later.
That's pretty radical.
That's pretty radical, but that's what you're saying.
Yeah, that's what I'm suggesting.
Right. So if you hold Chazal run really, really high levels, which we do, it's conceivable.
No.
But
Sounds like
it's radical. It's radical.
No, it was a whole thing. That's what Hitler did this for a while. He tried to propagate different types of truths in the media to control the future.
Yeah, but we want to talk about controlling the past.
No, but same thing. Both. I mean, we would do this for both, for past, present, and future. He would just try to the whole big campaign that he ran.
Okay, I don't know. Yeah.
And it sounds like
Hitler can't change the past.
sounds like
No,
the thing
of
about
course
the.
not.
That's what I'm suggesting. We're talking about changing the past.
I don't know, but it sounds like the Kotzker Rebbe's opinion on the Rambam with demons.
Yes, it does sound like that, right? When you heard that from me at some point?
No, I read about it somewhere.
Yeah.
But I think it's never something that it's like a joke, like it wasn't meant seriously.
Well, we never can tell with the Kotzker. There's the story with the Kotzker is that he said, if we're talking about the same story, that he was talking about the machlokas between the Rambam and the Vilna Gaon as to whether shadim exist or don't exist. And the Rambam holds that there are no demons.
Yeah.
And the Gra says that the famous Gra in Shulchan Aruch says that the accursed philosophy led the Rambam astray. And of course there are demons. And supposedly the Kotzker said, Eilu ve'eilu divrei Elokim chayim. When the Rambam said there are no demons, they cease to exist. Because the Rambam said, Tzadik goyse because Baruch Hu mekayim. The Tzadik decree, Hashem fulfills. And when the Gra said that there are demons, then the demons came back. That's more or less the way you heard it. Yeah. So yes, it is a similar idea. It's not stretching back into the past, but it's manipulating history. But right, exactly. Okay, so that would be, again, these are radical ideas, and you're right, we don't know if the Kotzker meant it seriously or not, but again, by the Kotzker, it's hard to know. What did you want to ask me for? There was something you wanted to ask me. No.
Oh, no, well...
About multiple realities.
Yes, if Hashem sees everything in that perspective, in that light, then there is some semblance of multiple realities taking place at the same time, at the very least within his perspective.
Why? How does that follow?
I mean, if you're saying that the ashes of Yitzhak Hashem sees, right? In his perspective, they exist.
Oh, that's a good point. In other words, Kodesh Baruch Hu takes the world of Machshava into account, not just the world of Masa. Hashem, in other words, his thoughts are real, and they can even determine reality. It's interesting because there's a big issue since the Rambam holds that Malachim cannot take human form. The Ramban goes nuts over this because it says all over Bereshis they're taking human form, right? So so many people want to say that, and these are people who I disagree vehemently with their position. Many people want to say that according to Rambam, it's a metaphor, and therefore much of Bereshis is metaphorical. So we don't like that, right? So that's something which I reject. But I think like this. The question is like this: from my perspective, in other words, my position is that if you saw Yaakov when he was fighting with the Malach, right before he meets up Esav, what you would see is Yaakov going like this, and you wouldn't see them. You wouldn't see anything. You would see Yaakov wrestling with thin air, and you see all of a sudden Yaakov is limping. Why? Because it's not that Malachim don't interact with human beings, but they don't interact in a physical way. They interact in a vision. Because seeing a Malach is a form of prophecy. And therefore, but the others were in such a madrega that for them, the world that they saw in prophecy, the world of thought, was just as real, perhaps even more real, than the world of reality.
Sounds a lot like schizophrenia.
Schizophrenics don't consider to be prophets?
No, I'm saying like the way you describe it, it seems like something that is it sounds very scary.
It is scary, but somehow they managed. But another idea along those lines is that in this week's parsha, it says that when Esav came back from his hunting, and he entered the room, so he said, it says, Yitzchak trembled a great trembling, and it says, Rashi brings down, Ra Gehenim Psucha Tachtav. You saw Gehenim open under, according to most understandings, under Esav. So the question is, Yitzchak is blind. He can't see anything, right? And the answer is no. Yitzchak is not blind in the sense, he is blind in the material sense, but Yitzchak's perception of what the realm of holiness is altogether different level of perception, and that he still possesses. And therefore he can see Gehenna coming into the room. Even when Yaakov Avinu comes in, it says, Yitzchak said, "Re'ei reach b'ni kareach asod asher berach Hashem." See that the fragrance of my son is like the fragrance of the apple orchard, whatever orchard it is. But in any event, so there also Yitzchak Avinu's perception is not the perception of this world. He doesn't say, "Smell my son's fragrance." He says, "See my son's fragrance," and we have that also by Matan Torah, which is known as more well known as a phenomenon of synesthesia, when it says that B'chol am roim esakolos, right? All the people saw the sounds. So all these things indicate that there is. I'm trying to go with your idea here, and there is this notion of things going and functions, Hashem's perception and even human perception of things taking place in a world of thought, even if they don't take place in the world of practice or deed. Okay, so again, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's knowledge, according to the best answer we have, does not compel what's going to happen, but rather he's outside of time, and therefore there's no any deed is at the same time instant and eternal. Because from that perspective, and of course we can only say the words. It's not experiential for us. But if you're in that situation, so then every deed is forever, which is why the idea of a forosh yitzchak tzavra munach agavei mizbeach is there, and every deed is immediate in that whatever you're doing today takes place from Hashem's perspective in the same moment as Akedas Yitzchak. So just 1 second. We find also in this week's parasha this idea of kvitza saderech. So kvitza saderech actually means when Yaakov got very fast to Haran, came back very fast. It was actually last special Eliezer. So quite the simple understanding is that kvitza saderech is not, or I should say the common understanding, it's not kvitza saderech means that you go fast, but rather the earth contracts. So the different dimensions, the way Reb Dessler explains it, is that we exist in the Olam Asiyah. Tzaddikim exist in Olam Yetzirah. They function in a higher plane. What's the between Olam Asiyah and Olam Yetzirah? He says, in Olam Asiyah, the laws of nature are absolute, and miracles are a very rare occurrence indeed. In the world of Yetzirah, the laws of nature are flexible, and miracles are happening on a constant basis. So therefore, if some people live, and this perhaps would be the similar to the idea of multiple realities. Most of us live in the world of Asiyah, and therefore we can't make miracles. We don't see miracles. Great tzaddikim live in the world of Yetzirah, and therefore what would be a great distance for you and me, for them is a small distance.
Therefore, tzaddikim can pull the world towards whatever reality they are seeing at the moment.
Right.
Holy smokes.
Yeah. Okay, we'll end here for today. Any questions? Otherwise,
could you elaborate a bit more about why using the Rambam's approach to say parts of Bereshis are metaphorical is problematic?
because when you say it's metaphorical, then that means that the Chumash is lying to us.
Right.
Because the Chumash is telling us these things as historical. And if they're metaphorical, there's certain academic Orthodox who hold that everything until Lech Lecha is a mashal. So either there was no Noach, or there was, at worst, Noach went into his bathtub, took his rubber duckies, and took his boat, the boats which you have when your kids to float in the bathtub, and he called that a mabul. That's very bad. There's no, were to have some sort of chazal of something along those lines, it wouldn't be bad. But it comes out, chazal never gave us that. How can you possibly have the audacity to come along and say that? No, I know better.
And if Chazal can't be trusted for that.
Right, what can they be trusted for? Exactly. Okay, Rabbi Say.
That turned a really dark page quickly.
You have to say with a smile. All right. Should I turn off the recorder?